All right, let's see if this works. Yeah, I'm going to put myself on the little screen there and see if that, like I said, if this works, and maybe I'll try it as well with the war summary. Who knows? Anyways, this is first off just to thank William Arends again. So this is a two-part bit for the Arends translation attrition or the ATA. And here we go. Translator's note. I finally found another newspaper that declared itself to be nonpartisan. This is the Deutsche Zeitung, the German newspaper, also published in Berlin. Here are some articles from the 27th of May, 1917 edition of that paper. The German newspaper, a nonpartisan daily newspaper for national politics. Berlin, Sunday, 27th of May, 1917. Morning edition. The failure of the French in the Champagne. Official evening report, Berlin, 26th of May. In both the West and East, combat activity in the usual boundaries. With the purging of the grids that has been held by the English east of Loos, the rest of those units gave up 18 men and 3 machine guns as well. Southwest of Lens, 2 advanced heavy enemy assault troop units were repulsed in sharp close combat with high losses during the morning of the 25th of May. From noon on, heavy artillery fire of all kinds of caliber occurred on numerous positions along the Arras front, and no infantry attacks followed this activity. An advance by an English company on the road Bayonne-Cambrai was entirely repulsed. In the same way, an enemy patrol undertaken in the vicinity of Villers-Ploche and Villeret was defeated. Our patrols brought in prisoners and machine guns. On the Aisne front, the tactics of German counter-assaults had already, in past days, made the French give us back some of the small amount of territory that they had taken in their offensive. On the 25th, the army group reported on the attacks on Chemin des Dames and on the Stone Ridge south of Pargas. In a spectacular attack, our assault troops overran the enemy trenches. Besides the reported 14 officers and 530 soldiers that were captured, the French also suffered many heavy bloody losses. The losses on the German side, thanks to careful preparation and the spectacular cooperation of the infantry and the artillery, surprisingly minor. The assault troops holding the newly taken enemy trenches were immediately able to easily rebuff every counterattack on those positions. In the Western Champagne, the French again ran up against the German position on the high grounds, south and southwest of Norroy. After that, they spent the entire day putting down devastating fire on the German trenches, with the artillery fire actively increasing the heavy barrages after 4 p.m. On both the forward lines and the rear areas, the French laid down heavy fire of all calibers. This they brought along a 4-kilometer wide front with many powerful waves of fire. On the hotly contested high mountain and on the Lugan's land, the French had to quit from their early success due to another of our counter-assaults. West of Tournelet, the German fire held back the enemy. After the misfortune of their first attack, the French attempted to attack a second time, both times with similar failures in which they suffered heavy losses. I didn't look it up, but I would like to see the differences in the reporting from the Globe newspaper, because I'm pretty dark. It would be neat. Like I said, there's going to be some similarities, but I'd like to see which way they flavor, either side are going to flavor them. Anyways, a further 70,000 tons sunken. The new success of our U-boats. Berlin, 26th of May. Through the activity of our U-boats in the Northern Oceanic Theater of War, a further 70,000 gross registered tons, GRT, has been sunk. I've never heard of that before. The Northern Oceanic Theater of War. That's an interesting way. I like that. Among the sunken steamers can be found the armed English transport steamer Farley. Among the contents of the rest of the sunken vessels can be found coal, great amounts of foodstuffs, and dyed goods. Just going to say, it would be interesting too if there was a sister ship called the Moet that got sunk as well. Anyways, that's just a Canadian thing. On the 26th of May, one of our U-boats sunk the 6,300-ton auxiliary cruiser Hillary in the Atlantic Ocean. The Russian seaplane station Labara was attacked in the early morning of the 24th of May. Interesting, the Russian seaplane station Labara. No, I've never heard that term before as well. 21 enemy aircraft have been shot down. A great day for our Air Force, the Luftstreitkräfte. Berlin, 26th of May. On the 25th of May, our Air Force had a great day. Over the entire front, far to the rear of the enemy line, an observation patrol has been carried forward, which delivered valuable information that it elucidated from afar. The clear air allowed our balloon observers the opportunity to have an especially successful mission. On the Arends front, bombings accompanied by artillery fire have caused no more than 17 explosions. Our aircraft bombers have been exceptionally active, both day and night. And that's one thing we're starting to hear more and more of, is these big bombers. The greater number of these attacks have been directed at localities and troop formations at the rear of the main battlefronts. And this week, I know this is not what they're talking about from this week. This is an older bit. But this week, yet again, and this is 2 weeks in a row now, there's been pretty high casualties on civilian targets in England from aerial raids. It's pretty impressive. Anyways, excuse me. The greater number of these attacks have been directed at localities, I think I mentioned this, and troop formations at the rear of the main battlefronts. During one flight, a balloon hangar near Epinal was destroyed, and a munitions depot near Ponyville blew up in the air. One of our bomber squadrons threw bombs down on the fortress of Dover and nearby troop camps as well. Military installations near Folkestone were also hit, which we had talked about, I think, last week. Our pilots engaged with the enemy in numerous air battles. They did this mainly behind enemy lines and were fiercely contested on multiple occasions. I think it was like over 100 got injured in that thing. It was like 76 dead or something. Enemy lost 21 aircraft, and Lieutenant Almenroder raised the number of his victories to 20. The condition of the German colonists in Cameroon and Togo. This is really interesting. I'm really glad that we got an article on this. So thank you, William Arends. Something we don't hear about. I mean, it's occupied lands now. It's just all about German East Africa. Anyways, the North German public newspaper wrote, the memorandum from the Reich's colonial administration about the troubles of the Germans being held in the French prisons gives a disturbing picture of their indecent and barbaric treatment since they had been held by the French. In the unfortunate colonial town of Dahomey in West Africa, there's been spread malaria, dysentery, and yellow fever, which has been made worse by bad sanitation of the frontline services under the ruthless control of the brutal blacks, which is another aspect of the tropical climate. Inhumane mistreatment brought about by thrashings, imprisonment, and torturous punishments falls under the responsibility of the French administration, especially the adjutant Verrier. The French government, despite repeated complaints, has not as yet introduced an inquiry against these crimes, despite the call from the German government to renew the implementation or enforcement of a process that would also hold the German government liable for its actions. They thus have not met the deadline set for such judgments to be carried out. This leads the German government to the conclusion that it should also no longer be held liable for any of the actions that it has taken. Well, we've seen this many a times with other things, haven't we? With if you guys are going to treat our prisoners of war that way, then we'll do that as well. I'm not saying, but you get the idea. It's just a different thing. I'm really glad this was brought up. William Arends, we're going to go and take a look at a second installment of your ATA in a second here. I'm just really glad about this because I'd like to start maybe seeing if there is some more information we can find out about what's been going on the western part of the continent. Anyways, let's get into this bit. And I'm going to pop it here. I'm just going to pause for a second to get a glass, take a sip of water. And here we go. Translator's note. This is another article from the German newspaper of Sunday, May 27th, 1917. This was the Sunday on which the religious holiday of Pentecost was celebrated that year. Pentecost fell on June 8th this year. Thus, I found it interesting to see how this newspaper would refer to the meaning of this holiday in terms of the war. The article proved to be difficult to translate since it interspersed accounts of the first Pentecost, which Christians see as the founding day of the Christian church, when the small band of the disciples of Jesus, now called to be apostles, went out into the city of Jerusalem and proclaimed the message of the resurrection of Christ with the wartime trials of the German nation in 1917. Yes, William Arends, I'm also going to say in a side note, when I was reading this for the first time, I couldn't figure out in the later part of the article where your translator's notes had ended and the article had started again. I was like, oh my God, William Arends is turning into a Bible thumping freak or something at the end. But I was like, okay, it's the article. I was like, I don't know if we can put this. I was like, I don't want to start getting into this weird stuff, but we're good. We're good. We're all good. I was a little worried there. Anyways, I think I did that bit. So yes, the writer of this article tries to compare the events of the first Pentecost to the sacrifices of the German soldiers and the conversion of those that joined the Christian religion that day to those Germans on the home front by reading the accounts of the war and supporting those troops. The article also attempts to equate Jesus Christ with the hero from the German sagas, Siegfried, as well as mentioning to those who had participated in the German Revolution of 1848, a revolution that was not seen to be in the interests of the royal house of Prussia and its king, Friedrich Wilhelm IV, who was the great-grandfather of Kaiser Wilhelm II. By including those who held beliefs more in line with the revolutionaries of 1848, along those who still stood behind the more authoritarian imperial monarchy of the House of Hohenzollern, there is an attempt to join together those of differing opinions behind a unified spirit of German nationalism and the war effort of the nation. The main point of interest in this article in terms of World War I is this disjointed effort to weave together Christianity and the church with the goals of German nationalism and the different points of view found in the modern German nation under the theme of celebration of Pentecost. Thank you again, William Arends, for doing this. I'm really happy that you add you're like really putting in your thoughts and whatnot. This is the whole this is the bread and butter for me. I'm loving this. Thank you. The German newspaper, a nonpartisan newspaper, Sunday, 27th of May, 1917, morning edition. The German faith in Pentecost. Thus, having had to pass through so many temptations and persecutions, our faith has been, is, and forever will be more and more stronger day after day. These plain and simple words of Martin Luther, found in his sermons, call to all of goodwill to awaken the virile confidence and hope in our German hearts. The cruel circumstances of today can be perceived as being the hard test of the faith of our people through these temptations and persecutions. Here they have proved themselves while they have suffered through the harshest stresses. The original small Christian congregation once was sunk into gloomy mourning and faint-heartedness because the shining image of their leader had vanished from their sight. But then, with the fulfillment of a promised sign, they were pulled upward to perform new deeds of the Spirit. Yeah, this is where I thought, William Arends, I thought you were talking here, and I was like, oh my God. Pardon the pun, but I was like, oh no. This is the origin of the inspirational metaphysics that overcame the trifling attritions of daily life, and that irresistibly raised both their personal lives and the life of all humanity. This forever is the acknowledgement of the victory over the influences of every human calculation and consideration that would incapacitate the ability of these souls to have their lives and spirits ascend to the heavens. At that former time, the living fire that existed inside of the believers had been gently transferred from the heights of heaven through the thoughts of God. This spiritual fire is what had conquered the world, primarily as a supernatural act in the first congregations, then later in all the world, through the dissemination of the living word, all of which has been attested to historically. In the fire and flame of our young people, we see how their Holy Spirit has been awakened as though they have now become apostles of the German faith, even if only as conquerors out of the German world, both on its land surface and even more intensely against those temptations and persecutions, attacking us both inside and outside, that they have subdued with all of the ardor contained in our German way of life. Ever striving to withstand the violent strikes of fire falling down on us from above. Their effort displays a picture that is the light of a purer and stronger future glowing Germany. To be sure, whoever would possess the fire must endure its smoke, that smoke that makes our eyes tear from the fumes and haze of the poison gas that obscures the lights of the heavens. But as we view the horrors of the battlefield, observed through the artificial lenses of the protective gas masks, so are events conveyed through the official channels to our people as our success visibly grows to preserve the strength of their irresponsible sense of well-being, sense of well-being. I was thinking, what the hell? Securing it against the illusions of the dangers from the outside that could lead through an exhibition of the pathetic timidity to a numbing of the power that generates our inner energy. Excuse me. Even though the fullness of our sorrows are immeasurably great, caused by the tortures of this war that have plagued our German people, hold on, geez. Still greater yet and more significant are the advantages that for all time will carry forward the renewal of Germany. The earnest steadfastness of those who fight for us continues, despite the bitter losses of life on the battlefields. But those who read the reports of those deaths understand that they represent the hard course of our history that we have lived through with unyielding determination. We believe that these sacrifices are the best guarantees for the peace of Germany, and our dead instruct us that their words are to be valued more today than that they have been in the German past. For those who died for us have provided the conditions for peace, which they have written with their blood. These sacrifices bought with oh so dear a price for the full honor and the future of all German lands must not be wasted. Whoever forgets that will become another betrayer of these bloody murders and will be put before a tribunal of those who possess the conscience of Germany. For any such traitor will have committed the sin against the Holy Ghost of the German nation and will thus be exposed as such for the rest of this world's history. Translators note, in the Bible, the sin against the Holy Ghost was referred to as the unforgivable sin. And then yet again, I was like, oh my God. But anyways, it isn't. Even though the disciples of Jesus had to face the darkest moments of their distress, out of the apprehensiveness that they felt coming forth from their pain in their hearts, they still allowed the words of their master to lead them to victory, rather than falling into a questioning, half-hearted helplessness. That half-hearted helplessness, which is what our enemies say about the state of mind that they think we are in. Our glory will be made known in the character of our consciences, contrary to our enemies, lowering themselves by holding on to the concept that might alone makes right. The shining hero of the German sagas, Siegfried, also felt this obligation to be honest and brave. Thus, with his bright countenance, he entranced everyone who saw him with their eyes in that primeval world. A deep symbolic meaning can also be found in the very name of Siegfried, victorious peace. Folks have paid him great honors over many a day, more than 1,000 times or so, I would say. This he has earned through his boldness, while being faithful, loyal, steadfast, and true. He was an exceptional image of a man, and for him, there was no task too hard to do. Exhibiting the same boldness, the German people have at all times during their existence attracted throughout their history those who could do them either good or evil. We must understand that the nature of one who would be a conqueror is not determined by how his enemy chooses to fight him, whether or not sickness befall him, and whether or not he feels the thorn in his breast for having to leave others behind him. Thus, when others assert what they themselves have achieved, remember the saying, hold fast to what you have, man of the wild, and never let it go. These are the wise old words of a Bavarian soldier, words that we should mount on our houses where the counselors of the right could see them and reflect on the German goals of today, those goals that would bring us sooner to the peace that will be sustained for a longer period of time. For we must attempt to ascertain the mood of our enemies after they have been hit hard in this land of German hunters. Up until now, The numerous doubts that many lovers of the fatherland have spoken have done us no damage. As weakness exists alongside that of strength, though that is contrary to the goal of providing us blessings and benefits, even those who would tread lightly have also assisted in using statecraft on behalf of the German people. That is because they also have a persistent sense of loyalty to Germany. But now is the time for us to use the proven methods for the awakening of the German national sentiment that had previously been brought out by brave deeds in response to serious events. Now the people who are away from the frontline trenches and battlefields have to be shown the way to a stronger political resolution of the will. On these high holidays, the readers of newspapers also need their inner feelings to be comforted and consoled. So these contemplations on Pentecost must be written in the style of a mass, which should be brought to a close by the tolling of the bells, creating well-tempered sounds that are also heard by the ears of those among our national comrades who have different political beliefs than our own, those with opinions that were born out of the revolution of 1848. I wonder if those are the socialists he's talking about. They also want to set out a new direction for the Reich, as has been written in the songbook of the poets, set to music by for the chorus of Junius singers. On this Pentecost, just open the door of your heart and let the blessings of its consolations inspire, and you shall be born again, being transformed anew through the spiritual flame of that fire. LK. Hold on. And I'm just going to finish up a little bit with this and say that, I don't know about what you guys think, but just the tone in this article compared to a lot of the tones that we're noticing in the Globe article, I'm just finding, like, I'm wondering if it's like maybe a subconscious, people are knowing in Germany that maybe they're going to win, but the odds are pretty slim, and it's going to be, things are not going their way in a sense. And I mean, it just, it just seems like they're like struggle. We got to try a bit harder. People at the home front have to like do just all these things of, we've always had to, go over these obstacles so many times throughout our history versus what we're seeing in the Globe articles right now. It's very optimistic. It's only a matter of time before we win. There's nothing we can't do, and so on and so forth. I just find this really fascinating. So thank you again, William Arends, and hopefully this went well, and I'll try to, well, it's going to be sent up individually as well as being incorporated into the live stream. Thanks a lot. That'll be that.